Hey everyone, Nick Skevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners, back here with my top plays and value picks at each position for Week 13 coming up this weekend. Season's winding down, and I apologize for no video last week during Thanksgiving. It was a very hectic week, obviously, with the holiday. I've actually been nursing a broken toe for actually probably over a month now, and last week I re-aggravated it just before Thanksgiving, which really made things a lot more complicated and hectic, and just getting everything done and seeing family and all that and friends and everything. So in any case, I apologize about all that, and but in any case, I'm glad to be back here for this week. And actually, now that also the college football season is winding down, the regular season's concluding this week and it's championship week, I should be able to get these videos done a lot more consistently and hopefully crank a few more of these out as the regular season winds down here over the month of December. So anyways, let's dive into the action here. So starting with quarterback, as we usually do here, I have two quarterbacks for the top quarterback. I really just could not. I had to go. I couldn't go without dismissing one of these guys. So it's Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger. Both are very much in pass-heavy offenses right now. The Saints are projected for about 2.5 more points than the Steelers are this weekend, and the matchup versus the Lions, indoors at home, obviously is a little bit better than the Giants, certainly. But however, I would note this about Roethlisberger and the Steelers at home in particular. Pittsburgh is particularly pass-heavy at home. And Roethlisberger in home games since 2014 has averaged 345 passing yards, 3 touchdowns exactly, actually, and only 0.72 interceptions. And if you do the math on that, it comes out to being about 25 fantasy points per game. So obviously that's very good for any quarterback, obviously, in the NFL. And the other thing I'll add on to that as well is Roethlisberger has been especially dangerous against non-divisional opponents at home. Against the division, he's still pretty good, but he's certainly not as good. The Bengals have actually, there's only been 4 games where Roethlisberger's failed to hit the 300-yard mark in his 18 or 19 home games over the last, 2 and 2.3 years. And 2 of those 4 were against the Bengals, actually. And so, that, makes sense from a little bit of a familiarity standpoint. And so this is obviously the Giants, who they only see once every 4 years. And the Giants have never seen this offense that the Steelers run. So I think it's a great matchup for the Pittsburgh offense right now. And, Steelers are 6-point favorites at home. So certainly would expect a big day from Ben. And obviously Drew Brees as well. That's, just a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. So moving on from that, let's move on to the value play quarterback, and I've said this name before. It is Tyrod Taylor again this week. And I know Oakland, Buffalo's playing at Oakland this weekend, and I do know that Oakland is 9-2 and playing well. However, that is completely due to their offense. The Raiders are ranked dead last. Yes, dead last in yards per play allowed this year of all NFL teams. The line of this game right now is actually Oakland by 3, and which essentially means that Buffalo and Oakland they're pretty much dead even on a neutral field. And I bet if you told the average football fan that, they would think you're absolutely crazy. Let me just say there is a reason for that line, and this game should be a shootout, as pretty much all Raiders games have been this season. Tyrod continues to get a lot of love in the running game. He's usually very low owned. He just continues to be low owned and overlooked each week. And Sammy Watkins, should be on the field more, obviously, now that he's healthy. And I think his snap percentage will go up more this week. And he'll certainly help Tyrod in the passing game as well. And I'll just pull up Tyrod's numbers here. Right now, this is just 2016 numbers. And you'll just see here on the right-hand side here with the rushing numbers, obviously, Tyrod is getting about 7 to 8 rush attempts per game. And you'll also see Tyrod has had 4 rushing touchdowns in each of 4 rushing touchdowns in his last 5 games. Also picked up a 2-point conversion there. And obviously, he might be running hot a little bit. But again, as I said, when the Bills fired their offensive coordinator in week 2 after their shootout loss to the Jets, the Bills have been running a lot more zone read. That's why they're averaging 5.3 yards per rush, which is the most in the NFL. And yes, the offensive line has a little bit to do with it. Yes, LaShawn McCoy has something to do with it, but it's also schematically, and it's also due to Tyrod Taylor and the way he's able to run the ball in the zone read. And again, like I said, this is a very weak Oakland defense, the worst in the NFL in yards per play allowed. I'm not saying Oakland's a bad football team. They are a very good team, but it's mainly due to their offense. Their record is not as good as it should be, basically, based upon the metrics. So I do expect a big day from Tyrod. 20 fantasy points, something along those lines should be expected here for this matchup. Okay, let's move on to the running back. Top play, absolute no-brainer here. David Johnson. Washington is 31st in yards per rush attempt allowed. Arizona is at home, and DJ certainly gets a lot of the love in the red zone, both from a running and receiving perspective. And he's just an overall fantasy monster. You don't need to overthink this one at all. And I will just show this really quickly as well. I pulled this up. This is, again, Pro Football Reference. And so this is just comparing Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson. And me and, Danny and Max here at Daily Fantasy Winners were on a Skype call earlier, and we were actually discussing this, pretty, in depth earlier, and just, talking, kind of comparing and contrasting them a little bit. And it was interesting just kind of pulling this up. If you look at the per game statistics of Le'Veon and David Johnson right here, you'll see their rush attempts and rushing yards pretty equal. Both average about 19 rushing attempts, about 80, we'll take the medium 85 yards per game or so. But obviously, and actually Le'Veon Bell's averaging 2 more receptions per game over David Johnson, and Le'Veon's obviously been used in the slot more. Le'Veon's used in the slot quite frequently, actually, especially with how banged up the Steelers' wide receivers have been. And David Johnson's getting a lot more of his receptions out of the backfield. So it kind of maybe makes sense a little bit that Le'Veon's getting a little bit more of the reception love. But the receiving yards are about the same. And obviously, the reason why David Johnson has had a slightly better year fantasy-wise overall are the touchdowns. David Johnson getting about a half a more touchdown rushing per game and 0.2 more receiving touchdowns. So is there a little bit of luck in that? Yes, there is. But I will also say that the Steelers are particularly pass heavy in the red zone. I believe they were actually the number 1 pass offense in the red zone last year, and they're either near the top or in the top, or the number 1 team in that again this year. I have to double check that. But they're near the top again anyways. Cardinals are a little bit more balanced, and but in terms of run and pass. But I will also add this, that not only are they more balanced and running it a little bit more in the red zone, Arizona, David Johnson actually gets about 23%, I think it's 23%, of the red zone targets in the passing game as well. So there is a little luck with the touchdown factor in that, but I'm just saying David Johnson really does get a lot of the love as well, just from a volume perspective and not so much just from a luck perspective as well. So they're obviously both fantasy monsters, and Le'Veon Bell's a great play this week too, but I do like David Johnson in this matchup just a little bit more than Le'Veon. And I say in a neutral matchup, I would give David Johnson the slight edge over Le'Veon just because of how much love he does really get in the red zone. It seems to be pretty consistent each week. And the Cardinals have also faced a brutal schedule as far as rush defenses this year, having Seattle in their division and things like that. So in any case, moving on from running back to wide receiver here. Excuse me. No, I got to touch on the running back value play. Got to stay on cue here. The running back value play, it is Carlos Hyde this week, and I'm actually going to elaborate on this game for a minute here, because this line in this game is very interesting to me. The 49ers are at the Bears. And this line is now PK, meaning the 49ers would be 3-point favorites over the Bears on a neutral field right now. This is the same 49ers team that has not won a football game since week 1 on the second of the doubleheader of Monday Night Football against the Rams in week 1. So this is interesting because it was only a couple weeks ago that the Bears were second in the NFL in yards per play, offensive and defensive snaps combined. They were a very popular bet among sharps because their turnover margin and yards per point, not yards per play, yards per point metrics were very poor, meaning they were getting really unlucky, and that was expected to turn around at some point. But now, while the Bears were banged up, for a good course of this season, over the last couple of weeks, it's gone significantly worse, mostly highlighted by Jay Cutler now going to the IR. Alshon Jeffrey's out. They've suffered more injuries on defense. They've just gone so insane over the last couple weeks. The Bears have now lost over 50% of their starters since week 1, which is just mind-boggling. So this has now completely gone the other way, because last week, if you followed the line between the Titans at Bears game, that line moved all the way from it was about the Titans were slight favorites, and that moved all the way to the Titans being -6.5 by kickoff. So this has completely gone the other way now. And it's gone as far as to say that to some people have the Browns and the Bears and the Browns, they're power rated about equally right now. And depending which sports bettor you talk to, or which sports NFL handicapper you talk to, some might even say the Browns would be favored over the Bears on a neutral field right now. And I'm not kidding about that. It's pretty crazy how banged up the Bears are, and it's really turned around this much due to their bad injury luck. And if you're a Bears fan, enjoy and if you're a Browns fan for that matter, enjoy the top pick in the draft, or close to the top pick in the draft maybe. Just really bad, unlucky year for the Bears, but maybe you're getting to hit the reset button at quarterback like you wanted. So in any case, getting back on track here, enough of that tangent. This is where Carlos Hyde comes in. If you look at most projections for people out there, they're saying they're expecting Carlos Hyde for only about 15 fantasy points this week, and that absolutely shocks me. That's about what Hyde is averaging, per game this year. But the 49ers have been getting blown out in just about every game this year. I mean, they've been down multiple scores early in the game, or at least, by the beginning of the second half. And you have to consider also the matchups that Hyde has been in just from what rush defenses he's faced. Let's take a look at this. They played the Rams week 1, obviously, in that Monday night game, and Hyde had a very good game. But here are the rush defenses he's faced since. At the Panthers, number 1 defense in yards per rush allowed. At the Seattle Seahawks, ranked 3rd. At home against the Cowboys, who are 16th average, obviously. You're at home for the Arizona Cardinals, ranked 6th. At the Bills, 13th, kind of middle of the road. At Arizona again, they're ranked 6th again. Played the New England Patriots, they're 11th. And then at the Dolphins, 29th, which is obviously bad. So they had a bad matchup against the Dolphins, a couple mediocre matchups, but they face a lot of the elite rush defenses between the Seahawks, a couple against the Cardinals, and against the Panthers as well. So obviously, Hyde has had a brutal slate, and he's still averaging 15 fantasy points per game in all these games where the 49ers are getting blown out. So now looking at this matchup, they're actually expected to have a 50% chance at winning, and should at the very least be in a tight ball game, whether they win or not. The Bears defense, like I said, it's very banged up. And also the last point is the 49ers have one of the most run-heavy offenses if you factor in game flow adjustment. Chip Kelly loves to run the ball right now with this offense, and especially with Kaepernick's running ability, and that makes Carlos Hyde that much better because you have to contain both of them. And so, in any case, I have Carlos Hyde projected for about 20 carries, just under 100 yards, just under a touchdown. Definitely expecting a touchdown, I'll be honest. But, for projection purposes, just under a TD, and maybe 2 to 3 receptions. So I'm expecting certainly closer to 20 fantasy points for Carlos Hyde, and he's very reasonably priced. So it's a very interesting line movement and an interesting game just to watch, obviously, from a fantasy perspective. But if you're into, handicapping also, it's kind of an interesting thing to look at as well, just on that line being PK right now and how much the tables have turned as far as the assessment of the Bears have gone. So in any case, we'll move on to wide receiver. Back more on track here. Antonio Brown is my top pick for wide receiver for a lot of similar reasons to Roethlisberger that I mentioned earlier. Also, the other Steelers wide receivers are still pretty banged up. Martavis Bryant suspended, but obviously Marcus Whedon's on the IR. Don't think Darius Hayward-Bay is going to be back. So Eli Rogers and Ladarius Green's kind of stepping up. But again, Antonio's going to be the main guy, of course. If you want to argue for Odell Beckham or Mike Evans for the top guy this week, I totally get it, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think Evans is a very close second to Antonio Brown, and ODB is in third. But again, they're all good. They're all good top plays as far as I'm concerned. As far as the wide receiver value play, I'm into Golden Tate this week. The Lions do have 5 players that actually average between 6 and 8 targets per game. However, Tate does lead the team in targets, and he has ran still pretty bad in the touchdown department this year. Obviously, getting the Saints in a shootout is obviously a very ideal matchup where the Lions are going to be throwing it a bunch. Game is indoors as well, which certainly helps this time of year. And plus, how in the world is Golden Tate 5,900 on FanDuel? That just almost seems like an error as far as the volume that Golden Tate still does consistently get, even though as bad as he's running in the touchdown department at times. So I think he should be about $1,000 more on FanDuel. Maybe not quite that much, but close to it, if not. So, and I would also just add this: Michael Crabtree's in the mid 6K range again on FanDuel. He is a very good play, I think, as far as value wide receivers as well. So, moving on to tight end. Tight end is a freaking mess this week as as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, Rob Gronkowski done for the year, had back surgery, very unfortunate. Doesn't look like Jordan Reed's going to play this week, so we're a little shorthanded this week. Greg Olson's in Seattle, tough matchup there. So for the top tight end, I'm going with Travis Kelce. It's not by much over a few other guys, but I am going to pick Kelce. The Chiefs are going to have to throw a little bit more, I think, in this Falcons matchup, because the Falcons offense is certainly the best in the NFL this year, and the Falcons have a very weak linebacking core, and I think if the linebackers get matched up with Kelce in pass coverage, that certainly benefits Travis as well. So Kelce, top guy, not by a whole lot, but I would say he's the best. Not considering price, of course. His top value play, though, there are a handful of value guys I could go with. I decided I want to go with CJ Fedorowicz this week. He continues to get about 7 targets per game, and I'm expecting a little bit more than that this week, as the Texans should throw more against the Packers in this matchup, because Green Bay, again, like we all know, very strong rush defense, but a really weak pass defense. And the Packers are still pretty banged up on defense as well. So Fedorowicz, certainly, I would say more in the 10 fantasy point range this week, as far as a projection goes, and which is pretty good, since he's not quite min, but he's close to min at least. So, and lastly, we will wrap up with defense. And defense is a little bit of a mess too this week, actually. And so for the top defense, I just said the Patriots. This is a pretty safe pick, since New England is a 13-point favorite at home. The Rams will be starting Jared Goff in his 3rd NFL game ever. And the other thing is, he's going to get, some people don't value this much. I do a little bit in the beginning stages, mostly from a potential of turnover standpoint. He's going to get put into a cold environment for possibly the first time ever since he's played football, just because he played at Cal in college. Obviously, like I said, this is his first is only his 3rd NFL start. He'll be going on the road to New England, where it's obviously going to be cold. He's probably not used to that. In any case, this is also a 10 a.m. local time kick for the Rams, and so even though New England has been kind of a disappointing fantasy defense this year overall, this is as good of an opportunity there is, and there is some decent upside here, just given the big spread and a couple of the other factors I previously mentioned. And as far as the value play on defense, for the first time I can remember, there isn't really an under the radar defense that's just particularly jumping out at me this week. But if there is one, it is the Eagles. I don't necessarily love it just because the Eagles are on the road and their sacks have been down over the last month or so. But the Bengals have allowed the most sacks in the league this year. The Bengals don't have A.J. Green or Giovanni Bernard, obviously. There could be some nasty weather, potentially some snow showers happening in Cincinnati, and that's when the wind can sometimes pick up. That stadium is right on the river. And so, and the Eagles play an aggressive style of defense, and they have really elite special teams too, actually. So there is somewhat of a lowish floor, just kind of given the situation being on the road and all that. But at the same time, just given a lot of those other variables I mentioned, there's pretty high upside as well, and certainly worth a stab in your GPP lineups, I think. So that's all for the picks. So glad to be back here with you guys. And so if you like these videos and enjoy them and getting good picks, and hopefully you are, and they're turning out all right, please remember to like and subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels. And of course, you can follow me at Nick Yuskevich on Twitter, and at DailyFantasyWinners on Twitter, at DFantasyWinners. All right, guys, thanks. Good luck.